Thank you all for coming, guys. I'm going to kick off. I'm going to hand over to Dan in a couple of moments. But what I want to bring your attention to is over the last month, what Dan has been doing. Dan is my dive master at Severntec Diving. Over the last month, he's been raising money for a charity called the Calendar Club. Basically, what it was is on day 1 of the month, he ran a mile. Day 2, 2 miles, so on and so forth, all the way through to 30 miles. And I think that became around about 5 or 6 full marathons towards the end of the month. Dan had not ran for maybe a year or 2 before that, but he just got his mindset right, which proves that we can all do what we want to do in this terrible time. Dan is trying to raise a bit of money for a mental health charity. He was going for a target of around about 450 quid. Now, I think he's trebled that. But if anybody does want to, show the support later on after the presentation, we will leave a Just Given page number in the chat box. But what I'm going to do, rather than taking up all your time now, because that's not what you're here to hear, I'll hand over to Dan, who's going to introduce Paul.
Cheers, Kevin. That's really good. Severe to mention it. Yeah, that was a really tough month, but I got it over with now. And yeah, we'll pop some links in the bottom of the chat later on for sponsorship. So cheers for that. So tonight we've got a very special guest. We've got Paul Toomer, president of RAID. He's here to talk about the deep wrecks, his experiences on the wrecks of Malta and Italy. Now, I've heard this talk before. It's a really, really good one. So I'm really keen to get Paul started on this. I'm going to hand over to him now and he'll screen share with you all. And we'll have a bit of time for Q&A afterwards. So think of some questions and pop them in the chat box, or just keep them in your head and we'll unmute you afterwards for a bit of a Q&A. So I will hand over to Paul now.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for inviting me to this presentation. I'll share my screen in a bit. There's a hand raising little button that you can press within the chat screen, I think, is it? And also, if you put any questions up that are pertaining to the slides that I'm talking to, Dan, you can interrupt me, mate, and I'll take those questions there and then. Okay.
Sure.
So let me kick off my screen share with you, which is there and there. Let's get this nice and big. Come on, baby. There we go. Can you all see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the presentation started off as a Gozo amphora wreck presentation because I think that's the one that most of you will want to spend some time on because it's the most intriguing wreck of that era in the Mediterranean. There are some pretty spectacular things down there, but this one is the kind of king of the hill for me. Certainly one of the most exciting projects I've worked on. Before I kick off, you can see on the bottom of the picture there, it's a courtesy of Timmy Gambin and team. Timmy Gambin is a professor at the university in Malta, and I'm very lucky and very privileged that Timmy invited me to be part of this fantastic team. So without further ado, let's kick on. So first of all, the project has gone from me being a deep diver to me really getting quite interested in history and geology and science and what have you, because as you're working at the bottom, you're starting to work with more and more of these learned people, and they're asking you to look for more and more things as you're sitting down on the bottom. So first of all, I needed to know who the Phoenicians were, because the wreck in Gozo is a Phoenician wreck. They were quite prolific traders between 1500 BC and 300 BC, so a very long time ago. Their nickname was the Phoenicians comes from purple people, because they dyed their clothes purple with that big shell that you see on the screen there. That's a murex shell, and they crushed that up and dye their clothes. The murex shell becomes quite important in our excavations because we were asked to look for them because they're quite a shallow creature, and you wouldn't find them crawling onto a wreck of this depth. So if there were murex shells down there, definitely it's more evidence that it's a Phoenician wreck. The Phoenicians were big traders in the Lebanon, Syria, Israel area, but they did spread as far across the Mediterranean as Spain. They've been spotted that far across. So the big thing here is what we were looking for initially was amphora. An amphora is like a 2,500-year-old shipping container. So basically what they used to do is they used to put herbs and oils and liquids and all sorts of stuff in these and then cap them off, and then they'd stack them inside the boat and ship them around the world. Okay, so when you start to see the pictures, you'll see that's the first telltale sign that we're on a pretty interesting wreck, because it's just littered with amphora. This particular wreck is not a massive wreck, which makes it even more intriguing because you don't have a lot of bottom time down there. So there's not a massive amount of wreck to cover. Okay. The wreck was discovered was discovered a long time ago by a British Navy officer, John Wood, his name was, and he convinced his commanding officer to put a hard hat diver down on the bottom to explore the wreck. And the way he managed to get the approval to put the divers on the bottom was that the commanding officer of the wreck wanted to have some amphora in his garden on his house. I think the house was on Gozo. So somewhere there's a house on Gozo that's got a couple of 2,700-year-old amphora lying in the front garden. So pretty interesting. I met him on the last time I went out. I've missed 1 year. And the last time I went out, we met him, and we'd done 3D photogrammetry of the wreck. So we put him in a virtual reality mask, and we let him walk around. And basically, he was able to walk over and have a look at each amphora, have a look inside it, and basically glide around on the bottom of the ocean. It was a pretty spectacular moment. So logistics, most of you, I guess all of you know where Malta is, considering it's one of the top diving destinations for us Europeans. And you can see that arrow there. That's the medium island, shall we say, of Gozo. So logistics are not too horrific because it's a very dive-centric island and a very tech-centric island. The logistics on the days, though, were quite wild because that's the bailout. So each one of us was carrying 4 to 6 cylinders to go down to the bottom. The bottom is 110 meters deep. And the objective for the objective started off was to do photogrammetry, and then it ended up in the fact that cover stuff. So the wreck is very much covered, as you'll see from this picture. Is very much covered in silt, 2,700 years of silt lying down there on top of those amphora. And the objective was to go down there and start to use a dredge. You can see in the top left of that 3D photo, that's the dredge lying on the bottom. That's one of the first crude ones that we used. But basically what we do is we put a grid on the bottom, we mark it 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 1D, 1C, so on and so forth. And we put a bag on each one of those. And then divers jump into a square that's given to us normally by Timmy or one of the team on the surface. And we basically go and dredge in one of those holes. And then everything we find that's non-organic, apart from murex, is put into our bag. And then at the end of our time on the bottom, we clip the bag to our belts, we bring it up, and the safety divers take it off us. So you can imagine working at 110 meters in a rebreather with 4, 5, 6 cylinders hanging off your waistband, and you're lying in the mud is a pretty extraordinary task. The logistics of putting this dive together are unbelievable, because what they had to do is they had to put a permanent mooring in, and they had to get the mooring into an exact spot. So they dropped it from the surface. It's a big ton cubic block that they drop onto the bottom, and they'd inserted a hook into it. They dropped it almost in the right position. They didn't hit any amphora, but then the divers had to go down with lifting bags and move this 1-ton block at 110 meters and put it into position. Then we put a permanent shot line into it. And then the boat moors up on the surface, and the boat has a generator on it. And we run about 100 meters of hydraulic cable down the line, and we clip the hydraulic cable to the line. I say we. I'm normally there too late. I'm quite lucky. I managed to get away from the setup dives, and we clip it with a cable tie about every meter on the way down, and then there's a pump, and then the pump runs down to the dredges. So you can imagine, you know, just the hydraulic cable probably weighs, the hydraulic hose weighs about a ton, and the divers have to put that into the water first. Before the project started as well, we put down 6 blocks, which at the beginning of every dive, the first team down will go and clean those blocks. And the first team down is normally the photogrammetry team. They'll go down, they'll clean the blocks, and there's a white marker on the top. And those give us absolutely permanent markings of where the wreck is. So, you know, so those are set to geographical pointers, those. And then, as you can see, they're all tied in with lines. And then we pick an area to work in, and then we lay the dredges, and off we go. And every morning, the photogrammetry team go down. They film the area, especially the area that has been dredged the day before, because all the sediment will have fallen, and they can have a look at how much work has been done. And they basically forensically map the site every single morning. So we you know, we're not just going down, rummaging around in the mud and not cataloging it. We catalog every single thing. Every single artifact that's approved to be brought to the surface is put in a special bag, and it's brought to the surface and analyzed and worked on. So it's very, very interesting project. This video here is me. I'm the lower diver, and that's the expedition organizer. That's Timmy. We're just doing our decompression. As you can see, the teacup is Timmy's marker. Is that going to play it? Yeah, is Timmy's marker. So, and that's the line that will go up to the decompression bar. And what we're doing is we're holding our hands on there, not so much for buoyancy, but the pulsating of the pump. We can still feel the pump pulsating. It's quite a nice feeling. That doesn't seem to be playing so well, right? Let's just try it again. There we go. It's a bit of a boring video. It's 2 blokes decompressing, okay? So this is on one of the first times that the divers went down. This is a photo by Dave Gratian. Along the bottom, that's Timmy drifting across, and behind him is a submarine. We got to work with the U-boat Challenger on a couple of dives, and they sent down 2 submarines and 2 ROVs to map the map the dive site. The first time I went down on it, I jumped off the U-boat Challenger. I dropped down a line to 85 meters. I couldn't see the wreck underneath me at all. And I looked at my 2 buddies, and I was like, you know, where the heck is it? And next thing, this light went on next to me, and there was an ROV sat in the water next to me, and the ROV guided the divers down to the site. I'll tell you, I've never felt so magnificent in my life as having ROVs provide me the light on the bottom. It's just pretty spectacular. Normally, I'm used to jumping into wrecks off little wooden boats. And this is another view of the light being provided by ROVs and submarines. And as you can see, the wreck site is not that massive. Now, on my first trip down, I went down with Imi and Carrie, who are amongst the best 3D photogrammetrists in the world. They specialize in low light photogrammetry, which is incredibly difficult because every shadow creates an infinity hole in your photogrammetry. And I jumped on the boat, and they said, it's the last dive. We've got 1 chance to get it right because the photogrammetry hasn't worked. We're going to go down to the bottom. We're going to do a quick circuit, 12 minutes on the bottom, and we will be on our way back to the surface. That's the route that we took to get the 3D photogrammetry, and that took 22 minutes on the bottom at 110 meters. So that cost us about 4.5, 5 hours of decompression to come home from that. It was really uncomfortable because during the decompression, all the boys who'd finished their decompression were sitting on the boat eating chicken and dropping their chicken bones on us. while we were decompressing because we were bloody starving. So that's the map of how you achieve 3D photogrammetry. And then this is the finished image. So let's hope this plays across this bandwidth. There we go. So this is the 3D photogrammetry that Carrie made. You can see the measurement markers. You can see the big starfish sitting in there. You can see the amphora. You can see the grinding blocks, which are coming to the front of the image now. And you can see some excavation zones. This is before we really started excavating. It's pretty spectacular. You can't believe you can get that at 110 meters. The plan is that eventually these things will be open to the public, so that divers, non-divers, anyone interested who wanted to go to 110 meters and just have a walk around on the bottom can go and do that. And that's the video that we showed John, who found the wreck 52 years ago, and he's 80 years old now. And we let him walk around in a mask viewing that video. Obviously, he was interactive, so he was able to get on his hands and knees and put his head inside each amphora. And he was sitting in a lounge with us while we were having a nice cold beer with him. So this is the dive. So this is hopefully this one's quite high res. So hopefully this one plays nicely. That's the submarine going down. So that video, when you see all the dust, that's not bad buoyancy, by the way. That's him excavating. Okay, I get asked that quite a lot of times. Jesus, your diver's got crap buoyancy, right? On that first video, that was all shot before we began the proper excavating. So this is where we started to get pretty serious about the excavating. As you can see, this is grid 2A and 1B. And we were tasked with bringing those 3 amphora that are sitting around the blue line in 2A. You can see the dredge hose just sitting in there. This is also a color chart image. So as you get deeper, the images change color. All right, so you can see the greens changing color, and it gives the scientists an idea of how far we're dredging. All right, and these are the 3 amphora in question that the scientists and historians had agreed that we should build up. In the top right, you can see the edge of the dredge sticking into the hole. That dredge runs up to a pump, and then it also has an exit pipe on it as well. And the exit pipe goes into a catch bag. The catch bag catches about a ton of debris, and then that's lifted to the surface, and then we have a barge that comes along, and the crane lifts that out. And that goes to the university, and they filter through all of that sand to see that we've not missed anything that's been sucked up the dredge. And then it is anything that's not of historical value goes back to the site and is placed back on the site. Okay. So the task was that between the deep excavators, the task was to bring those 4 up. I went down with my buddy Jamie. We were the first excavators in, and it was just like, you know, God was smiling on us. and the earth around there is very clay-like. It's a very difficult job digging into it. And we just had a luck, and we managed to free the 3 amphora and find a grinding stone in about 12 minutes of bottom time. We had them all, we had them in the basket, and we had them sent to the surface. So here you'll see the recovery. So the 2 lights are an Italian cameraman who's filming a documentary. The bag that you see floating up in the air is attached to an amphora, and we can't fill the bag fully, because if we fill it too full, me and Jamie were worried that we would pull the handles off the amphora. We were also worried that once we got it loose, we wouldn't be able to control the amphora, and it would make an uncontrolled descent to the surface. Obviously, what you worry about then is that the bag deflates on the surface, and that amphora comes back down on your head. I can tell you that those amphoras weigh, I don't know, 50, 60 kilos, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 kilos, somewhere around there. They ain't light because they're full of debris. So what you're going to see now is you're going to see me and Jamie freeing the amphora. We're going to move along the bottom of the mooring block, which is at the front of the image. And then we're going to move to the right-hand side where we're going to drop these into the basket. It's a static camera, so you don't see us move. But because we're on rebreathers, you can hear us counting and talking to each other. And the most hilarious is you can hear us grunting as we try and lift that bloody thing. Bear in mind, this 110 meters. How we didn't get bent out of this, I will never know. But here we go. Jamie's in pink. pretty fun-filled video, I can tell you. So when they come to the surface, this is what we do. The amphora, we sink them in basically a plastic bin. We fill it full of seawater, and then it goes through a very, very long process till it can be dried out and displayed. The first thing that will happen is we had a lady called Lisa Briggs on the trip. She works at Oxford University, and what she does is she goes into that amphora and she brings every particle out of it, and she starts to look for DNA and isotopes, which can actually tell us a lot more about where the wreck's been and who was on the wreck and what it interacted with, and so on and so forth. And she can also find out a lot of information about what happened in the last 2,700 years in that area, because those amphora have got 2,700 years old of sediment inside them. And just to get an idea of the size of the amphora, that's me sat with the one amphora, and that's my roommate Darko behind me there. And this is our little dive locker that we have on the island. So pretty large piece of kit. So let me just go back. So when we were talking to all of the learned people, we had basically 2 apartments full of computers. Darko was doing a lot of mapping, and we had other scientists and all sorts of people there. And when I got to the expedition, I asked them what in particular they were looking for that they wanted us to bring up. And
these windows.
And not one person said anything other than please find us a piece of wood. Now, that there is not poo, okay? All right, that is a piece of wood. And I was just swimming, we were doing the cleanup, and I was just swimming over the framework that we had in the water, and I saw that lying there, and I thought, it doesn't look organic. So I just put it in the bag. I marked my bag, clipped my bag to myself, brought it to the surface, and indeed, when they opened up the piece and analyzed it, that was a piece of wood. Now, the importance of wood is it's highly absorbent. So DNA, isotopes, all sorts. And I do stand corrected on this one, but it's one of the only pieces of, or at the time was one of the only pieces of wood from the amphoran, from the Phoenician times that's been absolutely catalogued from bottom to surface. So in the last year, I had to miss the last expedition. They've excavated even further, and they found more fantastic artifacts. And there is the hope now that there may be some pieces of the hull left down there as well. So just putting it into perspective, Timmy's done such a magnificent job with this. He's not opened this up to the commercial industry. Commercial industry go down there in 2 weeks, they'd excavate everything. What he's done is he's allowed many, many people, you know, I'm talking dozens and dozens of divers, whether they're 40-meter safety divers or whether they're sitting on the boat, whether they're working compressors. He's allowed hundreds of people to participate in this. And what will happen is, I'm nearly 55, so in the next few years, I'll move out of the project, but someone will move in my place and continue this excavation. It's kind of a long-term excavation, not one of those quick, fast, smash and grab kind of things. So it's really, really beautiful. So what else is out there and what's next? All right, so these are just some of the images that Timmy has pulled up. Obviously, this is a nice little fighter that's lying down there. This is I can't remember what that one is. I'm not going to say because I'll only be corrected. But the beauty of that is you can still see the machine gun sticking out the nose. We were lucky enough to dive on a pretty much fully intact B-24 bomber not that long ago. They're just finding more and more World War II and World War I and prior wrecks out there, because it's the one thing about Malta is it's been fought over more than any other island in history. And during the Second World War, the conflict between Sicily, Malta, the Axis and the Allies was extremely prolific. They dropped more bombs on Malta than they did on London. All right. And between the shipping and aircraft, they lost untold out there. So this thing, Malta and Gozo make Truck Lagoon really look like, you know, kind of a very, very good runner-up, in my opinion, because there is so much good stuff out there. A lot of this stuff, interestingly enough, because I know a lot of you guys on this webinar will not be 100-meter trimix rebreather divers. A lot of this stuff is accessible, 30 meters, 40 meters, 18 meters. You know, Timmy's not just out there, you know, trying to show everyone how deep and how grand we can dive. The more stuff we can find shallower, the happier we are, because we can do better expeditions on those things. On a lot of these, we don't salvage anything at all unless there would be a real scientific or geological or historical value for us doing that. Here's another bomber. That's a Junkers that snapped in half. So that's the back end of it. One or two of these planes out there still have the swastikas on them. One of the ones that you'll see in an image in a minute is from just outside Napoli, between Napoli and Capri. We dived Junkers out there, and some of the pilot's belongings are still lying in the airplane. That's how untouched these things are. Machine guns still there, all the engines, everything. So this is another little video for you of, I think this is Naples. This should be Italy now, primarily Italy. A little bit of Malta. Got to throw a bit of Malta in. So this is the Junkers that I was talking to you about. And you'll see one very, very happy Paul in a minute. There I am. I think a little bit of wheeze coming out of me right now. then this is us exploring a massive amphora wreck. Yeah, so interesting things about that one is Timmy sent us out to have a look at that amphora wreck in Naples. The difference between the wreck in Naples is about 300 or so years of age. It's a little bit newer than the Phoenician one, but the pile of amphora is a good 3 meters in the air, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds sitting in front of you. If you watch that video really slowly, you can see that some of those amphora are actually corked. So they may still be liquid or something inside them. I don't know if you saw the little bit of the video of me cutting with a bread knife. You saw bubbles come out. That was lead ballast. And how they used to make lead ballast was they'd make a frame to pour the lead into, and then they'd put some rods of wood in, and then they'd pour the lead over the top, and then the rod would the wooden rods would disappear, leaving an air gap, and that would then provide proper ballast for the boats. When I cut into that, that wreck is 2,200 years old. That was 2,200-year-old bubbles that were coming out of there. And if I'd have known, I'd have taken a little jar down to grab some. The other really cool thing is me and my buddy Jean-Michele, we were on the bottom looking for that wreck, and they'd showed us some ROV footage, and the ROV footage clearly put the wreck at 105 meters. So they knew where it was, so they put the drop line in. We jumped in with all our gear. We went down to the bottom. We get to the bottom, and it's like 94 meters, or 95, 96 meters. So I'm trying to look around, and I can see that it's slightly grading down in one direction, so off we go. 20 minutes later, we can't find any wreck, so we come back to the shot line. We go up, we do our deco. We do exactly the same the second day. Then Timmy gets on the boat, and Timmy's like, "You didn't find it?" And, "No, we didn't find it. I'm sure you're in the wrong place. We found one amphora, that was it." And he says, no, it's down there, I'm telling you. So we said, "Well, we can't find 105 meters. He goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, the ROV's depth gauge was broken. It's 95 meters, not 105. So the very, very next dive, we went down, we made the right turn, and there, as we came over, as we came through the gloom, there was this mountain of amphora. It was one of the most, I'm not a spiritual man, but that was a pretty spiritual moment. So show you a couple of other things. This is one that perhaps some of you have already dived. If you're a 40-meter deco diver or a 45-meter deco diver, you can get onto this and have the time of your life. Lying on the sand, this is 56 meters. And this is the HMS Se7en. This was deliberately scuttled because it went past crush depth. It's a wonderful training dive. It's a wonderful videography dive. But this is Carrie at his best. This is him doing a long 3D of the HMS Se7en. And if the visibility is right, I can promise you, you can sit at about 25 meters and you can see what you're seeing now with the naked eye. And it just lies there, listing over to one side. And if you swim to the bow and you swim away from it and you look back, you get the scimitar edge just staring at you. It's an incredible dive, considering that, you know, it was scuttled. So it is what we would call a Disneyland wreck. It's still such a worthwhile dive to do. You can see the front coming at you now, how sharp it is and how beautiful. the very, very elegant wreck. All right, we're going to go around and around in circles. Okay. Let me just pause this one. Okay, so in May 2017, a very, very lucky group of us got out to go and dive the HMS Olympus. The Olympus was the biggest submarine disaster for the British Navy. It had some 89 people on it when she went down. There were 4 people who got off. It was winter, so even the Maltese water was not warm, and you can imagine if you're just in a set of normal, trousers and shirt, having to swim several miles to safety is very, very difficult. 4 of them made it to shore, and 1 of them died of a heart attack as he stepped onto terra firma and walked up. The rest of them perished. We went out there for the anniversary. They'd found the wreck. We dived the wreck. We put a plaque on the wreck. We attended military honors between the Submariner Corps, the British Submariner Corps, and the Maltese military. Timmy had raised funds to unveil a beautiful memorial to them with their names on, and we were pretty honored to be part of this team. This one was absolutely spectacular. If my memory serves me right, this is available, but this is super deep. This is in the 125 meter deep. But this is untouched and is a mind-blowing wreck. So I hope you enjoy this one. Oh, hang on, let's go back. Sorry, guys. There we go. There you go. Pretty spectacular. So that's kind of what I get up to. You've seen a little bit of it. Honestly, I could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours because I've been extremely privileged to be part of many, many expeditions. I've done some of the most incredible, I've done all of the 3 incredible wrecks up in Scapa Flow with my friend Emily, who I've been privileged to work with. And then of course I work with Timmy, which is super thrilling. So I hope that was satisfactory. I will now turn off my screen sharing. There you go. If you have any questions, I'm all yours.
That's it. That was awesome. Thanks, Paul. That was really inspiring as well. And from the chat, I can see a lot of people want to go and do those wrecks now, and they want to join in that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was great. I really, really like those airplane wrecks. Those photos were awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a few questions coming. I'll just ask the first few questions from people, and then if people want to unmute and ask a question afterwards, I'll let you know when you can do that. So a couple of questions come in. Kev wanted to know how deep some of those wrecks were. I know you mentioned it, but can you just go over how deep the first lot of wrecks were that you went down?
Yeah, so the Gozo Amphora wreck is 110 meters deep.
Wow.
The Amphora wreck in Napoli is about 95. The bomber that you saw in Napoli as well, where you had the happy pool, that's at about 75. The Stubborns at bottom 56. The Olympus is in, from memory, 125, somewhere around there. It was bloody deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you know it's deep, right, when you look up, right? And you look down at your dive computer, and you can just see the deco like rattling around on your fingers.
Yeah, and what about the temperature down there? Angus wanted to know what temperature it was down there, and I think that was about the Amphora wrecks.
So we did one wreck. We did a B-24 in about 60 meters of water. And we did that in winter, and we were asked to do pretty significant bottom times, sometimes up to an hour. And I remember getting cold at around about the 50-minute mark. I would guess it was around about 12 down there. And it was a pretty civilized, I think, 16 on the surface. But we're quite lucky because Timmy's planned it pretty well for the Gozo wreck, because it's super deep and we're in the water a long time. But we do it in September, so it's about 16, I guess, on the bottom, but it can be 28 on your deco.
Yeah.
So, you can see guys peeling back their hoods, and it's like, just swimming and hanging on the hang bar or free hanging. It really is. It's really nice. When I did the Scapa Flow wrecks, of course, I'm not very good in the cold anymore. I got too many, motorcycle injuries. But I went up with Emily to Scapa in February. I don't know, January, I think it was. That was brass monkeys. But here, Malta's, it's properly accessible year round. If you've got a dry suit, you've got a decent base layer, it's completely accessible.
Nice, that sounds pretty good. You mentioned the B-24 there. Stephen was asking, where was that one? Is that on Malta?
That's in Malta. I can't tell you too much about what I did there.
Confidential.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty special event, and I always, there is a hierarchy within the expedition, and until information gets released, I certainly won't be the mechanism to do it, because there's quite a lot of the things that we're doing, we're very privileged because they are war graves, and some of them are mass war graves. And just going out and idly bantering about it is just not really right when it's someone's family,
Makes sense, yeah. Another one that came in.
Open the mic up, Dan, and get some interaction going. There's quite a few people now trying to get online. Yeah, so I think we've got Roscoe, haven't we?
That's it, yeah. Roscoe's was the next one. Yeah. So do you want to ask it, Roscoe?
Yeah, I have. Well, Paul, thank you very much for the. Let me just put my video on as well. Yeah, thank you very much. It was really lovely to listen again. Like while you were excavating the amphoras, like how fragile was the material of the, like they were made from?
In actual fact, when we all went down, it was a bit kid gloves. You know, we were quite gentle, and we rapidly realized that those amphora are pretty robust. Okay. We didn't go down with jackhammers and stuff. Most of the stuff is hand excavated. In fact, it's all hand excavated. We very occasionally used a small trowel. And if we were ever in doubt, we always had Timmy with us. So we kind of make an executive decision. We're a bit worried about the fragility of where we are. So let's back off and let's get someone who really knows what they're talking about, rather than, you know, some geezer in a rebreather, you know. And then he'd swoop down and he'd go and have a look at everything, and then he'd give us all a briefing, or he'd leave us notes, or he'd go down in the first team and then he'd stagger the team so that they would come over to him while he was decompressing, and he'd give them notes about what to do. Sometimes, you know, something had happened, and when the next team are coming down, he's already saying, no, bin it, go up, forget it. We're not touching where we are. Something's gone wrong, you know. Very, very mature way of dealing with a wreck, considering that what he proposed and what the team managed to pull off, and we have got an awesome DSO, right? You know, I will sing his praises. Dave Gratian is a mind-blowing DSO. He's school of hard knocks on these expeditions. You know, we're all a bunch of egos wandering around there, and he's brought us into line. He works very well with Timmy, and what he's been trying to do, you know, imagine laying a ton of hydraulic hosing, you know, and then Timmy found the expert to make that work, and then they've made amendments to it all. You know, it's very, very clever, but surprisingly not that fragile. In one video that you saw, Roscoe, you saw Timmy swimming along with a very small amphora. Yeah. Generally speaking, those are the captain's amphora. That will be his personal stuff.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Lovely. Thank you. No, thank you, Paul. Cheers.
Pleasure, mate.
Next, I think, Emma, you wanted to ask a question. Do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, Paul. Thanks for that. That was brilliant. I was going to ask, what's the sort of average time frame of these expeditions? Are we talking like days, weeks, even longer?
Yeah, it all depends on what the kind of objective is. Generally speaking, the amphora the amphora expedition Gozo is a month long. Timmy tries to get as many people to stick for the whole month, because then he's got a solid platform to work from. But unfortunately, many of us have jobs, and you know, we've got to do other stuff. Some of them are 2 weeks long, but they're very, very seldom short. However, that doesn't mean, you know, if someone were qualified, that they wouldn't be able to go in for a shorter time frame and come out. Because as I say, Timmy will block out a period of time where he's going to dedicate his time and attention to that project. He's also an extremely busy man. He's a university professor. So, you know, when he gets his block worked out, then him and his team, the poor buggers, they spend hours and weeks trying to choreograph us all into sort of a cohesive working team as we go through. Yeah.
Okay, Fab. Thank you. Can I steal another question time? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the 3D photography, because that's really, really cool. Where can we sort of learn more about that and how they do it?
There are quite a lot of guys offering courses. I know that we're tracking to build a course at the moment. There are some pretty good experts in the UK. Carrie is a very, very nice guy. And if you Google Carrie Hitsonen, I'll send Steve the name. You can find him. He would help you get advice. But I'll seek his permission first, of course. I can tell you, John Kendall is doing really, really well with his 3D mapping. I think Ollie van Overbeek is doing some 3D mapping. I'm not 100% sure. I know he's been doing quite a lot with John. There are quite a lot of guys now offering these 3D mapping courses.
It's just a really interesting thing, isn't it? Especially because it's becoming more and more like we need it more, because we need to see more what's down there. So
yeah, you know, so I've got a son who's 8, and I was fortunate enough to dive on the Hampshire up in just outside Scapa Flow. All right, the historical value of that wreck is unfathomable. And my son, the chances of him getting a chance to dive it, and the chances of there being that much left by the time he's skillful enough to use a rebreather in 68 meters of water with other divers and fulfill objectives is going to be slim. So when Chris and Carrie and Emmy and Timmy and all of these learned people are putting these 3D photogrammetries together, as I say, there is the hope that all of this stuff becomes publicly available so that we can go and do those things. And let's face it, right? Even if you were diving the Chiara, which is in 28 meters of water, which is at about 1 billion people dive on it, would your friends and family be more interested in watching a 3D image of it or just you swimming along it with a GoPro?
Yeah, that's very true.
And
preservation, isn't it? It's necessary.
Yeah, and because this one was dedicated to the Mediterranean, when I first met Carrie, I had a GoPro, and I said to him, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Have you got decent lights with that GoPro?" So I said, "No." So he said, "Well, I'll give you some lights, and you and your buddy Mick, where do you want to work?" So I said, "I like the debris field," because we'd found this big gun that had been buried in the sand. And he said, "I'll give you some lessons. Go out and do some 3D photogrammetry." Well, in the 3D photogrammetry that they've released, there's footage of a gun that's shot with a good light and a GoPro 4.
Yeah.
Seriously?
No, that's brilliant.
And I didn't even have a decent housing, so me and Mick used to get to about 50 meters and press the record button, because when we got to the bottom, the housing bent and you couldn't press the record button anymore, right? And Mick would just swim around behind me with this monster light, and we just track together around this gun, spiraling around. So you don't have to go out and spend millions to do 3D photogrammetry, and it's such a fascinating thing to do. And I've got Chris and Carrie. We finished the dive, and I fell asleep on my bunk. And they did 3D photogrammetry of me fast asleep because I was that unconscious. Okay.
And where can we get that footage? Because just
for with the footage of me sleeping.
Yeah, just for fun.
I'll make sure it goes up.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Got a couple of more. Stephen Baxter, do you want to ask your question?
Hello, mate. Brilliant talk, really enjoyed it. How did you get into expeditions, taking part in the expeditions?
I suppose a lot of luck, really, and the kind of never give up attitude. So luck in the fact that I did my open water diver with Phil Short. Okay, I don't know if you guys know who Phil Short is. Yeah. If you don't, Google is your friend. But I did my open water with Phil. Actually, there's a guy participating on the call called Tim, who's my best friend. Me and him did our open water with a bunch of our friends, and Phil was one of our instructors. And then I decided to become a professional diver almost immediately, and Phil took me under his wing. Then I went on to become professional recreational, and then when I moved back into tech, again, he took me under his wing. Excuse me. When I got involved in rebreathers, I had a really wonderful instructor, Aaron. And then I became friends with Kevin Gurr as well. And all of these guys started to give me advice. And then I went to every kind of tech event that I could. So I went to the Eurotechs and I went to all of these things. I was diving, and then I started doing my own little mini expeditions. So I lived in Malta for a few years, and me and my two best buddies, we'd go out and do movies of the existing wrecks and then try and find stuff. And then people started to hear about us, and I'd go and shake anybody's hand and say hello, and can I be a safety diver? I'll be the T-boy. I will do anything except mix gas. Okay, that's about the only thing. I'll do latrines, I'll sweep decks, I'll do anything. I just won't mix gas. Okay, I just hate mixing gas. And consequently, people started to hear my name, and then luck of all luck, when I launched Raid, our Italian distributor, one of the partners there is a guy called Gian Michele. Gian Michele is like Timmy's brother. And Gian Michele popped a good word in for me, and Timmy said, yeah, I'll give him a crack. And me and Timmy got on really well, and the rest is history, really. You make your own luck, right? But by meeting people, and the main thing is getting your skills up. You've got to be a good diver, so you've got to be really capable of doing your decompression, really capable of, you've got to be a team player. But I tell you that the expedition market is in so desperate for new faces and new skills. I really, the turnaround on expeditions, I've never been on an expedition where the same people as the last month were on the expeditions. So there's always opportunity. But I think my biggest piece of advice would be to get out there and do interesting stuff with the dives that you can already do, and go out and get trained, so that you get accepted. I can tell you that on all of the expeditions that I do now, they're rebreather only, because they're all mixed gas dives. So even though they're in 50, 60 meters of water, which is achievable on open circuit, just to pump that stuff at the end of every day for an open circuit diver is just a killer on the logistics team. Whereas topping up a diluent and topping up an oxygen is a lot less of a task, because we don't use our bailout cylinders unless something goes wrong. So once they've made us our bailout, we just pick up the same bailout. So unfortunately, there is a bit of a spend, because you kind of need to have a rebreather to get going where I go. That's my bit of bad news. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, pleasure.
I think, Glenn, do you want to ask any questions? Let's see if Glenn's there.
No, thank you.
No, you're okay. Okay.
Yes.
We got one from Alison, though, which kind of leads on from that last question. Alison, do you want to ask that one, or do you want me to shout it out?
No, sure. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Alison.
Yeah, just a general question. I've always been interested in the Britannic. What expedition is on your bucket list, and why?
Okay, Britannic is absolutely sitting at the top. I know it's now commercial. It's a commercial expedition.
Yeah.
Because if you've got the skills, you can pay the money and go and pay to go on it. Really, I guess Richie and Co did the last real big, publicly acknowledged expedition to the Britannic. I was destined to dive the Britannic, God almighty, 8 or 10 years ago. But unfortunately, on the expedition before I went, there was an incident that resulted in an extremely important diver dying, and the wreck was shut off. And then I've never really had a chance to go back, but I will. I know my buddy Pete Mesley runs trips out to the Britannic, so I'm going to try and get on with him. My other bucket lists are the Victoria.
Yeah.
Because it stands like that in the water, and I've got quite a few good friends at the British Sub Aqua Club who did that back in the day, and again I was due to go with them, and then there was some political unrest, and we never got to go on that. And then just for the sheer fun of it, I want to go to Truck. I've never been to Truck Lagoon.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, I plan to go again in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Have you been to Bikini? Have you done Bikini?
No, that's a bucket list one too.
Yeah, get hold of Aaron. Aaron will get you out to Bikini.
Yeah.
He doesn't. But I'll go with Aaron or Pete, and I'll do Truck Lagoon for sure. I've just got to do it, right? Just gotta do it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I would, I'm really, really keen to do. I'm just keen to hang around with the guys who are finding stuff. I think being privileged enough to go on something that's completely virgin, that's never
been seen.
Yeah. I think that's half the excitement. And if you're fortunate enough to be in that first team, and you're it's kind of burnt into your brain that yours were the first eyes that saw it in 50, 60, 70, 1,000 years. I kind of dig that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Thank you for that, Paul.
It's a pleasure, Alison.
Thank you.
We got time for a couple more. I'm just going to ask Anthony's question. He asked if there's any life down there on the wrecks where you were going so deep.
When we got on the Olympus, it was absolutely teeming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Growth all over it. If I remember correctly, black coral on it as well.
How deep was that one?
Sorry?
How deep was that one?
125.
125.
I think. But it was teeming in life, fish all over it, really exciting. Most of the others in Malta, unfortunately, there's not massive of life on them, just because of how the Mediterranean's been fished. But occasionally you get something really cool, like a piece of plankton float past you on decompression. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
We've seen some pretty good stuff, but there's lots of growth on them. There is life on a lot of them. The B24 had quite a bit of life on it. The Southwold has got a lot of life on it. But the shallower stuff doesn't seem to have tons and tons of growth on it, especially, which when you get growth, then that really does introduce life, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a ton.
Cool. Daryl, do you want to ask your question next?
Yeah, hey Paul, it's Daryl.
Hey mate.
Oman.
Oman, Daryl. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate.
Very good.
Yeah, so next year we're talking about doing expeditions and how we can get people involved. Next year's Oman. So we'll be looking for divers. We'll be looking for people who want to help us with the research work. So I don't know how we set it up, but if there are people who are keen to get into some warmer water and discover some interesting virgin wrecks, happening next year.
Yeah, let me just jump in, Daryl. I didn't know you were on the call, mate, because I haven't had a look at the list of who's there. I quite often when I find out who's on the call, it inhibits me somewhat. I did a rebreather presentation, and Jan from JJ was there, Kevin from Sentinel was there, all the Poseidon boys, Paddy, SSI, everyone was sat in the audience, and I had a complete meltdown because I should have just got on blindfolded. Daryl is based out in Oman, guys. And Daryl and I have been speaking for quite a bit of time because he's in a unique position where he has got access to some pretty exciting virgin wrecks. So Kevin, Daryl and I will give you a shout, mate. And then as this moves forward, then you can have a look at how you and your guys can be involved in this. All right.
Yeah, that'd be great, Paul. Thank you. I've put my email on the chat for Daryl. Anyway, any information you can forward it on to me.
Yeah. So that's kind of handy that you were there, Daryl, because what you've just seen now is you've just seen a guy who's looking to set up a bunch of expeditions and needs all levels of divers to participate with all levels of skills to make the expedition run smoothly. You can't just have on an expedition 10 guys in rebreathers who are all capable of diving to the bottom. What you've got to do is you've got to have the safety team, the team who put the downlines, the uplines, the trapeze, the spare gas, the gas monkeys. You've got to have all of these guys in place. You've got to have a DSO. You've got to have all sorts. Quite often DSOs don't even get in the water. They just stay on the surface, or they're the first in, last out. Miserable job. But thanks for jumping in there, Daryl, because that really must give everyone a bit of an uplift that these things are happening.
Yeah, definitely share some info on the Severntec Facebook page afterwards. Give us some links to that. That'd be awesome to hear about, Daryl. Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe we can do it on DPVs, Paul, eh?
My JJ is downstairs pining, I can tell you.
Right, I think that's it for questions, unless anyone wants to speak up and unmute yourselves and have a quick question before we wrap it up.
I think there's one there for Deb, Dan.
Deb, are you there? Let me try.
Someone asked something, but yeah, it's Roscoe. I just have a question with regards to the wrecks in Malta. Paul, are you aware of someone actually keeping a list of them or register or something?
I'm not as au fait as I should be, but basically, Timmy and his team and people from all over the world have provided expertise in terms of boats and side scans and all sorts of stuff. But you know, they're relentless in looking for stuff out there and tracking history and going to maritime museums and whatever. But I do know that a lot of the wrecks that we have dived on are open. And the idea was to catalogue them. I really don't want to speak for Timmy because I don't want to get this wrong. But the idea was to try and do some kind of cataloguing. And it was to do nothing more than to try and keep them as pristine as possible, so that, you know, so let's say the B-24, let's say you're now, you're a master rescue diver. So you've got to go and you've got to do your nitrox, you've got to do your deep 40, you've got to then do your deco 40, then you've got to go buy a rebreather, then you've got to do your deco 40 on your rebreather, then you can get to your deco 60 on your rebreather, and then finally you can go and dive that wreck. So isn't it unfair if I swam past the back of it and pulled all the 50 cal shells out of it and stole the machine gun off the front? It's just not the same then, is it?
Yeah.
So the idea, and again, I stress, I'm not speaking for Timmy in any way, but the idea, as far as I got wind of ages ago, was, you know, how do we do something as a community where we protect those, you know?
Yeah.
And most importantly, that, you know, there are Maltese dive centers out there. There are lots of my friends out there because I lived there for 7 years. And, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful if they could all charter their boats and, you know, go out and dive and really enjoy these things? And I don't want to, you know, take it any further than that, because really that's a question above my pay grade, I'm afraid. You know, I don't live in Malta, and you know, I'm not really
Okay.
privy to that much. I'm sorry, mate.
No, that's fine. No, just wondering, yeah, if there is a...
One thing for sure is there are dive centers who are diving on some of these wrecks now. So,
yeah,
you know,
okay.
they should definitely research that.
Yeah, right. Thank you. No,
It's
thank you.
Pleasure.
Great. Thank you.
We got one from Deb now. Do you want to ask that?
Deb, you need to unmute your mic. Hello?
There we
There you
go.
go.
Got you unmuted, Deb.
I was just asking for, hi Paul.
Hi.
I mean, years ago I went to Malta holidays a couple of times. We went over to Gozo, but is there anything around Camino? The tiny, that little island.
Sorry, can you say that again? You just crackled out there, or can you shout it down? Because the connection with me, it's not so brilliant there.
Yeah, sure. So Deb was asking if there's any wrecks or dive sites around the little island of Camino.
Oh yeah. There is a little, what would they call it, patrol boat that they've purpose sunk. But we've not found anything from any of the wars or of historical value around there. But I don't know if the team have actually been out there looking at the moment. I would imagine that there's lots of stuff littered around there. But the three, you know, obviously Malta is the main hub, really. And if I remember correctly, the three Royal Air Force airports were all on Malta. So that would be where the main attacking would have been going on. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's, you know, the stuff around Camino. There'll be stuff around Gozo as well. You know, you can just imagine, you know, a Spitfire shooting a Messerschmitt and it lands in the sea. You know, it's not those islands don't take up a vast area of ocean, so there could be quite a lot. There's a lot of theory and whatever about the stretch between Messina in Sicily and Malta, because the German, what was his name, Uncle Albert or something was his name. That was his nickname. He was a German Kesselring. He was a German commander out of Messina, I think, in Sicily, and he was only about 2 weeks off beating the Maltese and the Allies, and actually being able to take over Malta. When the story goes that Hitler said, phoned him up or sent him a message and said, I want you to concentrate your efforts on Greece. He made objection about it, was told that if he made any more objections, he'd be doing a Rommel. So he just basically shut up and went after Greece. And in that time, that was when the Allies managed to convince the Americans to lend them an aircraft carrier, which they brought in along the north of Africa, put the Spitfires on with long-range tanks, and then flew them up. And the crews on the ground were so fast they could change the long-range tanks to short-range tanks in about 3 hours and get them back up. But then the offensive moved from Malta to Messina, because it was all defensive before then. So you can imagine that in that stretch there must be tons of stuff in there, because the Allies shot the Axis countries to pieces when they went up there. I can tell you, if you want to do some pretty epic diving as well, go up to Sicily. There's some pretty mind-blowing stuff up there. In about 65 meters of water in Sicily, there's a wreck called the Valferrita. That is like an Italian thistlegorm. Bombs, cordite, trucks, motorbikes. It is just the most mind-blowing dive. You go on a 65-meter dive and you say, oh, we're going to go for 30 minutes. And you suddenly find you've just taken 2 breaths and 30 minutes is over, because it's just so exciting. It is mind-blowing. My first dive on that, we were so late getting in the water, we ended up doing a night dive on it. It was bloody brilliant.
That sounds pretty epic as well. Right, I think we'll wrap up there. So thanks for that talk, Paul. Really, really inspirational stuff. And thanks everyone for asking questions and getting involved. We've got a talk on next week. We do these every Tuesday night. So next week at the same time, we've got James Sanderson presenting 13 simple hacks to help you teach a better scuba class. A load of tips that he's accumulated over the last 15 years of being a dive pro. So go to severntecdiving.com and our Facebook page to sign up for that. And we'll hopefully see a load of you there next week. So thank you everybody for coming, and thanks again, Paul, for that presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you,
Paul.
Thank you very much, guys, for asking me to come on the show, and thanks for the incredible support. That was really nice on a Tuesday night.
Thanks very much. I'll unmute everybody to say goodbye now, and we'll all catch each other soon.
Nice one.
Cheers. Bye.
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 Bye. Cheers, Paul.
Bye.
Thanks, Dan.
Wow, there's a lot of questions on there, right?